I don't think there was a single defining moment. It was a series of several moments, but in a very short period of time. So I arrived in New York City in the summer of 1981, having been born in New York, but having lived in many other places for a long period of time. And so the first 3 patients, with what turned out to be AIDS, in July of 1981, and they were young men who were dying of pneumocystis carinii pneumonia, and that was very compelling. I had been in infectious diseases for 10 or 15 years at that point and worked overseas as well, and had never seen pneumocystis carinii pneumonia. It was just at the time in which this new entity, which didn't have a name, was being described on the West Coast and on the East Coast and in New York. So that was very striking. In a very short period of time in that year, it became clear that this was not a passing event, but something that had a kind of malevolence and catastrophic future. And for some reason, I understood that early on. Part of the reason was this view of the intensive care unit at the hospital I was working at, Montefiore Medical Center, being filled with young people on respirators dying. And this was an event that we were not familiar with in our societies. That is a society that is an epidemic of death and dying in young people, usually, and with their parents actually burying them. And this is an inversion of the life cycle, and something that itself was clear to me was a new phenomenon. The other thing that was very, very striking, so these men, as it turned out, were not men who had sex with men, but injection drug users. And in those early days of the HIV/AIDS epidemic, that was not a population that was recognized as being part of the epidemic. But in the Bronx, where I worked, that was the beginning of the epidemic. So we were actually witnessing and experiencing the same epidemic in a different population. And that was very, very important to know and to find out more about. And that included women who were dying of AIDS, who were not themselves injection drug users and were clearly heterosexually transmission. So the thing that put this all together as a single event was a dream. The dream was sort of like something out of a Ingmar Bergman movie. It was in black and white. And I was on something called Jerome Avenue, which was a commercial center. The Bronx then in this area had become a Latino culture. And the streets were always filled with people and noise and color and fruit stands and people with vendors on the streets, and the overhead subway roaring past and honking, and loads of people and activity. And in the dream, I was walking on Jerome Avenue, and the train was overhead, and the fruit stands were out, and the cars were all double parked, but there were no people. And I had this sense that there was this thing seeping into this community that was taking everybody away. And it was a terrible, terrible sort of prescient sense of what was going to happen into the future. And it was clear to me that this was really a new event in human history, and it really sucked me in, and I've been doing it ever since.